If you've been waiting for the release of The Weeknd's new album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, you're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Another week. It's going to come out on January 31st. Its originally scheduled release date was January 24th. And that's because this album and The Weeknd himself really are embroiled in what is undoubtedly the biggest story in music as I'm speaking to you today on January 25th, 2025. And that is the fires in Los Angeles and their seemingly almost complete destruction of the music industry in that town, which has been the locus of so much impactful, seismically consequential music in American pop in particular for many decades, as I'll get into. There are many reverberations of this decision to delay this album, of The Weeknd's response to this absolutely heartbreaking, tragic nightmare that continues to unfold in a city that has meant so much to The Weeknd and his music for so long. Firstly, let's just consider how anticipated a record this is and has been for quite some time for a variety of reasons. This man was the second most streamed artist on Spotify in 2024, behind only Taylor Swift, with 14.8 billion streams on Spotify alone. Now, I'm not great at math, but I think those numbers add up to a significant degree of anticipation for any new music from this man, least of all an entirely new record, which, as we'll get into, is advertised as likely to be his final record as The Weeknd. He is, by many accounts, and he's given many interviews to this effect for a period of years now, intent on making this his final record under the moniker of The Weeknd. His real name is Abel Tesfaye. And he has said, I might make another album as The Weeknd, but I'm definitely going to kill The Weeknd, as he says in one interview. I'll quote from more abundantly in a minute. Or I might just record records under my given name, Abel Tesfaye. I don't know. I'll have much more on that in a minute. And that in and of itself is one of the most fascinating developments in music that's going to play out in the form of this new record to be released, delayed by a week because of the LA fires on January 31st. The one reason I think The Weeknd's work has resonated to the extent that it has, to the extent of making him the second most streamed artist on Spotify last year, second only to, of all people, Taylor Swift, the goddess of streaming generation on platforms like Spotify, right? His brand, to me, I've felt like this about his music for a long time. His brand of sort of sultry, sexy, forlorn, soul-tinged R&B that he flaunts, in particular, to my ear, on EPs like 2018's My Dear Melancholy, is totally unrivaled. There is no one on the planet who can do that better than this man, and I dare say there may never be anyone who can outdo The Weeknd in that vein that he has explored with such power, with such effect. Tracks like Call Out My Name, I Was Never There, Hurt You. Oh my God, I swoon listening to that stuff to this day. Never do I turn on an EP like that when I'm driving around in the car rocking my Spotify without feeling chills. There's a gripping power to that material for me in particular that helps me understand just why on Spotify alone nearly 15 billion streams were generated by his music in 2024. And it's not just the album that has been delayed in response to the LA fires, but it's also the album release concert that was supposed to happen yesterday at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. This is a city in the San Gabriel Valley that's about a 20-minute drive from downtown LA, about 11 miles to its northeast. And The Weeknd's comment on his decision to cancel this concert, in addition to delaying the record itself, was as follows. This decision reflects his commitment to prioritizing the well-being of those affected by these tragic events. The Weeknd himself has said, "My focus remains on supporting the recovery of these communities and aiding its incredible people as they rebuild." He has said about the delay of the release of this album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, now to be released on January 31st, that, quote, "Out of respect and concern for the people of Los Angeles County, I have decided to push the release of my album to January 31st. Now, There are reasons why the tragedy in Los Angeles that these wildfires reflect has resonated so deeply with the weekend. He himself said earlier this month that, quote, the city has always been a profound source of inspiration for me, and my thoughts are with everyone impacted during this difficult time. Now, Rolling Stone had a little tidbit on the importance of Los Angeles to the weekend and his music specifically, saying this, quote, Los Angeles has played a character in the weekend's music for years, particularly on the ominous and commanding After Hours. That 2020 record, which featured the fan favorite Escape from LA, marked the first time in the album trilogy that was originally scheduled to conclude on January 21st with Hurry Up Tomorrow before the singer delayed the release in acknowledgement of the wildfires that have ravaged LA this month. Now, the Weeknd's response to this nightmare that continues to unfold in Los Angeles, continues to decimate the music community there, is not just about delaying releases and canceling concerts. It's about much more than that. He has pledged himself $1 million to relief funds in the city. And that has been explained, I think, in a Rolling Stone piece that I'll link to in the description as follows. In partnership with World Food Program USA and the Weekend's own XO Humanitarian Fund, the donation of $1 million will support the Los Angeles Fire Department Foundation, GoFundMe's Wildfire Relief Fund, and LA Regional Food Bank in providing relief for those impacted and displaced by the fires, as well as the firefighters who themselves are working to battle them. And there's another dimension to the Weeknd's sort of squeamishness about releasing this record in the aftermath of such horrific events as the biggest fire ever to engulf Los Angeles, which will probably go down by some reports as the most expensive natural disaster ever to strike the United States in its history. Of all things, the lead single for this record in the wake of those fires is Dancing in the Flames. That is the title of the lead single for this record. No one could possibly have foreseen how unfortunate the timing of a song title like that would be before Los Angeles was engulfed by this horrific, devastating, inconceivable fire, the multitude of fires in and throughout the Los Angeles area. As Rolling Stone said, holding the Rose Bowl concert would have been in generally poor taste considering the album's lead single is titled Dancing in the Flames. Certainly that thought is not at all lost on Abel Tesfaye, aka The Weeknd himself. Pitchfork, there's a lot of reporting on which musicians, which producers, even executives, agents, the songwriters. I mean, the devastation to the music community as a result of these fires really is limitless, unfortunately. There's one Pitchfork report that gets across a little snippet of just how devastating it's been. They, in one story I'll also link to in the description, say, quote, numerous musicians and their families have had fundraisers launched after being severely impacted by the Los Angeles wildfires, including Div's Zachary Cole Smith, Auden Cola's Tim Darcy, Empress of and Fat Tony. Pitchfork went on to note that on January 13th, producer Madlib shared that he lost his home, his music archives, all of his recording equipment, all lost to the fires. Thus far, MusiCares and the Recording Academy have pledged $1 million, and Beyonce has pledged $2.5 million toward wildfire relief efforts. A benefit concert, FireAid, has also been announced to take place at Inglewood's Intuit Dome on Thursday, January 30th. Now, that FireAid concert, presently includes a lineup of such huge figures as Olivia Rodrigo, who has signed up to play that show, Rod Stewart, Stevie Wonder, Sting, Lady Gaga, Billie Eilish, Katy Perry, and others. But that's just the FireAid concert to be held at the Intuit Zone. What we now know is there will actually be two FireAid concerts held concurrently that day on January 30th. There's another to be held at the Kia Forum, also in Inglewood, which will include a lineup of such artists as Red Hot Chili Peppers, John Mayer, Green Day, Stevie Nicks, the Black Crowes, John Fogerty, Joni Mitchell, Dave Matthews. Pink is going to play there. John Fogerty, of course, of Creedence Clearwater Revival fame, CCR, Stevie Nicks of Fleetwood Mac, etc. No doubt also will be playing that show. Fascinatingly, Stephen Stills will be playing that show. You may not know who Stephen Stills is. I understand that to some in my audience, it might sound blasphemous for me to say that some may not know who Stephen Stills is. However, Rick Beato has posted a video a couple years ago now of having been in a cab in which I think he initiates a conversation about Paul McCartney, and the driver of the cab, who was a younger person or an Uber driver, had no idea who Paul McCartney was. Do you? It's okay if you don't. I'm not, this is a no judgment zone here. But Paul McCartney, right, one of the Fab Four of the Beatles, this person driving Rick Beato around had no idea who the hell that was. So it certainly stands to reason that folks may not know who the less famous, though still inordinately famous Stephen Stills may be. It's interesting to me that he's going to play this LA show because this is Stephen Stills of Buffalo Springfield fame. He's done some wonderful solo work, in particular his amazing song Treetop Flyer. He was a founding member of Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills, and Nash, right? This guy in his era really did it all. And more recently, just a couple years ago, put out a record with Judy Collins, right? But one of my favorite rock and roll stories involving Stephen Stills, I think exemplifies how long Los Angeles has played a prominent role in American pop music and helps to illuminate just how devastating and how heartbreaking it is to watch the music community literally go down in flames here in and around Los Angeles now for a period of weeks, right? The story is this involving Stephen Stills, and why to me it's so deeply moving that he in particular is going to play this show. And I wonder if the other figure I'm about to mention perhaps might also do the same. In 1966, another famous, even more famous artist who has done a lot with Stephen Stills, including a wonderful record in 1977 with the Stills Young Band that yielded the immortal hit Long May You Run. In 1966, Neil Young drove, now there are conflicting reports about exactly what kind of hearse it was, but the report is, and Neil has talked about this in interviews, he drove either a 1953 Pontiac hearse or a 1948 Buick Roadmaster hearse from Toronto to Los Angeles. In either case, no matter what kind of hearse it was for whatever reason named Mort. And he drove this hearse from Canada, his native Canada, to LA in pursuit of his dreams of striking it big in the music business. Now, Neil hilariously has said the following about the role that this hearse played in the incipient stage of his career, which of course blossomed into one of the most immortal, unforgettable, legendary careers that music has ever seen. He says, Bruce, I think he's referring to Bruce Berry here. Bruce Berry was a Neil Young roadie who died on June 4th, 1973 at the age of 22 and became part of the subject of Neil Young's later track, Tonight's the Night, about, in part, the comrades in music that he lost to drug overdoses. Now, that was, of course, a theme that by then, in 1973, he had already explored with incredible power in songs like The Needle and The Damage Done, which, if you're not familiar, you must hear. Perhaps I'll link to that in the description as well. But he says this, Bruce and I were tooling around Los Angeles in my hearse. I loved the hearse. 6 people could be getting high in the front and back, and nobody would be able to see in because of the curtains. The heater was great, and the tray was dynamite. You open the side door, and the tray whips out right onto the sidewalk. What could be cooler than that? What a way to make your entrance. Pull up to a gig and just wheel out all of your stuff on the tray. Anyway, Bruce and I were taking in California. Now, here's where Stephen Stills comes into the story. And this is one of the most legendary stories in Neil Young lore, okay? Stephen and Richie Furay, who were in town in L.A., putting together a band, just happened to be driving around too. Stephen had met me before and remembered that I had a hearse. As soon as he saw the Ontario plates, he knew it was me, so they stopped us. I was happy to see effing anybody I knew, and it seemed very logical to us that we form a band. We picked up Dewey Martin for the drums, which was my idea 4 or 5 days later. Stephen was really pushing for Billy Monday at the time. He'd say, yeah, Dewey's good, but Jesus, he talks too effing much. I was right, though. Dewey was effing good, Neil Young says. Now, this became the formation of one of rock and roll's bedrock bands, Buffalo Springfield, whose song, For What It's Worth, written by Stephen Stills, and made immortal, I would say, by Neil Young's chiming tremolo part on his gorgeous Gretsch White Falcon guitar, which I got to see him play live on a version of Mr. Soul in New York City years and years and years ago. That is a story that became this legendary band, Buffalo Springfield, whose legendary song, For What It's Worth, became one of the anthems of their generation there in the late 1960s. That's why Stephen Stills is playing this show. That's what Los Angeles has meant to American pop music for a very long time now. We're going back well over half a century. That's why Joni Mitchell is playing this show, which is incredible because Joni, her appearances are very sporadic at this point with her health problems at her stage in life. She did make an incredible appearance at the Newport Folk Festival. Was it a couple years ago now? I think at 23 or 24. Thanks to some friends of hers in the music industry who were really excited to get her out there and playing again for a crowd. It was wonderful to see that. But her history with Los Angeles goes way back to those Laurel Canyon days of the mid to late 1960s, right? With her albums, her songs like Clouds, Ladies of the Canyon. I mean that stuff back then. Those records in the late 60s and early 70s by Joni Mitchell were of a breathtaking beauty and of a lyrical intensity that some believe rivals Bob Dylan's. I mean, David Crosby has said that he considered to be he's considered Joni Mitchell in some ways to be superior to Dylan, or at the very least his equal as a songwriter. I mean, obviously that's huge praise for Joni. And Joni Mitchell, in public comments, isn't shy about embracing such praise, by the way, which I love about her. I love her chutzpah and her personality. And the fact that she's going to play this show is another very moving demonstration of how much Los Angeles has meant to the music community for so long. And certainly it has meant a great deal to The Weeknd for a long time as well. The Weeknd is releasing a movie in tandem with this now delayed album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, by the same title. The film will be called Hurry Up Tomorrow as we speak. It's scheduled for a May 16th release. He's going to star alongside Jenna Ortega and Barry Keoghan. And of course, The Weeknd has some acting chops. He showed that in that HBO show, The Idol, a couple years ago, which factors into this whole story as well. I'll get into that in a minute here. But another thing that makes this, as I hinted to earlier, is such a big deal is this record is a huge moment in music generally, and certainly a huge moment in the career of The Weeknd, because it's his probably, but quite likely, his final album as The Weeknd. He told Variety, quote, "Everything needs to feel like a challenge. And for me right now, The Weeknd, whatever that is, it's been mastered. No one's going to do it better than what it is right now. I think I've overcome every challenge as this persona." He added in separate comments that his moniker as The Weeknd entails, quote, "a headspace I've got to get into that I just don't have any desire for anymore." You have a persona, but then you have the competition of it all. It becomes this rat race, more accolades, more success, more shows, more albums, more awards, more number ones. It never ends until you end it. Now, to me, it seems that this has been on The Weeknd's mind for years. He's been given interviews to this effect for at least a couple years now. Back in as long ago as May 2023, he told W Magazine that, quote, "I'm going through a cathartic path right now. It's getting to a place and a time where I'm getting ready to close the Weeknd chapter. I'll still make music, maybe as Abel, maybe as The Weeknd, but I still want to kill The Weeknd, and I will eventually. I'm definitely trying to shed that skin and be reborn." Rolling Stone had a fascinating portrait of a specific moment in which Abel Tesfaye as The Weeknd realized his days as The Weeknd might be done. Listen to this, and it ties into that show The Idol on HBO that I just mentioned. This realization crystallized for Tesfaye as he was performing those number one singles, Blinding Lights, The Hills, and Save Your Tears Among Them, on his recent Dawn FM stadium tour. It was the final show, a sold-out night at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. Again, this takes place in LA, right? He showed up for the crowd, but when he opened his mouth to start the show, he realized that his voice didn't. "I was defeated on the world stage with everyone watching," he said. "The show was ultimately rescheduled." Now, Abel Tesfaye, The Weeknd, has said of that moment this, "Part of me was actually thinking you lost your voice because it's done. You said what you had to say. Don't overstay at the party. You can end it now and live a happy life," Tesfaye said. "Put the bow on it. Hurry up tomorrow. Now we're here. When is the right time to leave if not at your peak? Once you understand who I am too much, then it's time to pivot." Now, the role of the idol in this moment is, as The Weeknd explains, the following. This is a show, the timing of which coincided with this moment at SoFi. He portrayed Tedros for that HBO show, a show called The Idol at the time. He says, "My theory is I forgot how to sing because I was playing Tedros, a character who doesn't know how to sing." Now, that sounds like a whole lot of first world problems to me, but man, here are two reasons he may be doing this. One, maybe to bring some fresh creative energy to his work by pushing himself out of this comfort zone of the familiar as The Weeknd and into something new that to him might feel more daring and more uncertain, bringing an edge and mystery to whatever might come next for him. Cynically, though, it might be a move similar to the sort of philosophy behind the tried and true farewell tour, whereby you've gone through this, right? You've observed this from afar and thought, that's kind of odd. You know, they announce a band or an artist this long goodbye to generate ticket sales and interest by creating this narrative that it'll be your fan base's last chance to see you. I mean, imagine if 10 years from now, The Weeknd again releases a record as The Weeknd, right? This intrigue and anticipation created by having led the world to believe that he was never again going to create another record as The Weeknd. That's marketing genius 101, right? So my bottom line here is this. I would look for The Weeknd in the year ahead to make many more grand gestures on behalf of the ravaged city that has meant so much to him and his music for so long. I would expect this record to be a huge seller, generating another stunning haul of streams to become one of the biggest albums of the year. Be ready to take up The Weeknd on his threat to no longer appear or work as The Weeknd under that moniker. So whatever tour he may embark on behind this album, definitely get on that, because it may well be your last chance to see him in this guy's possibly forever. Or perhaps this is another one of those farewell tour type deals where he's like, yeah, I'm done. I changed my mind. Now I'm really done. Or maybe I'm not quite done yet, and here I am again as The Weeknd. Well, we don't know, man. But you know, as I like to say, as it pertains to what's ahead for The Weeknd this year and in the years beyond, stay tuned.